Hello, this is Andy Weinstein, founder of Godot and host of What Are You Waiting For? Today we have a really special guest. We have JoAnn Garbin on the show, and we're going to learn about what motivated her to do the things that she's doing today. JoAnn, do you mind giving us a quick intro? Who is JoAnn Garbin?
Thank you for having me on the show without knowing who I am. No. So, I am a lifelong entrepreneur, innovator, sustainability nerd, professional. I'm actually an old head of sustainability at this point, which is kind of crazy to think about. And newly an author. My friend and colleague at Microsoft and I just put out the book, The Insider's Guide to Innovation at Microsoft.
Excellent. So, what made you get onto this path, right? What was your original impetus to get into sustainability and get into thought leadership? Because if you write a book, you're a thought leader.
That's what they tell me.
It's a well-defined rule. Everybody knows it. But kind of what started that whole impetus?
It goes back. It goes way back. I grew up in a family business, so the entrepreneurism came from the start of just that's how we rolled. Also came from a single parent family, so scrappiness and teamwork and all of those things started early. And then I think for a lot of people in my age group, we came into the world at a transition point with environmentalism that was really the beginning of modern environmental movement. The EPA had just been formed. Rachel Carson's work had been out a decade or so. And so a lot of us grew up in the 80s and 90s just thinking about trash and water and trees and all of it. So it caught for me pretty early, and I started doing a lot of things even as early as 14. And then it it felt right to me, so I've built a career around it.
So tell me about that. I guess I have a two-part question is what was your family business that you were involved in? And then what happened at age 14 that kind of started that all?
We are a family of construction workers, people. Started off in roofing and then expanded into general contracting from residential through light industrial. So I was 9 the first time I helped pour a concrete pad, and just learned all of it very early and grew up hanging out on big equipment, front end loaders and stuff like that, and playing in piles of dirt. So dirt still makes me really happy.
That's amazing. Like I grew up in a family business as well, obviously, as a third generation Pepsi bottler. And one of the things you notice as a young kid in these environments are things that everybody else doesn't realize is happening. You get to see, like in a construction site, you get to see the waste piles that are just generated as part of the process. In the beverage industry, I see the waste processes that are generated just from dropping a pallet or the stretch film that we wrap every single pallet that goes out the door.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wonder when you were in that environment, did you want to get into the family business, or did you want to take that knowledge and do something different? Like what, how was those experiences in the family business? Did it attract you or repulse you? Like in almost everybody in family businesses have either or.
It's true. It's true. So I think part of my nature is that I like to invent and create. So I loved building things. I still love building things. I don't have a basement anymore, but when I did in Philly for 20 years, I had a full woodworking shop in my basement. I can't claim to be the best at it, but I enjoy it. So I grew up loving to build things. I love seeing things go from nothing to something. And I just took it in a different direction. I didn't want, construction's hard. When you're watching people in their 50s and 60s climbing up on roofs and being out in the hot sun and lifting heavy things and breaking concrete, and even for, my brothers who are a few years older than me, just even as teenagers and in their 20s, the physical toll it took on their bodies, it's hard work, and not in like the it'll make you stronger way. It's like, no, you're going to be crippled when you're older. And I looked at that as the girl, number one, and not a particularly burly woman. And I was just like, all right, well, this is, I want to learn how to do this and I like doing this, but this is not my life. I'm not going to make a living at this. So I went into engineering for school. Like, I got a mechanical engineering degree. Engineers, generally speaking, are, we always have something we can do that will pay the bills. And I coupled that with my art and creativity and everything else. And then my mission around sustainability. And I kind of took all of that into the businesses that I've built and the businesses that I've joined and helped build. But I would say the construction's still very much at the core of what I do. It's been realized a couple different ways over the years.
That's fascinating. I'm a child of an artist, and so and I went to a high school that was very art heavy. And one of the things in art is it's a combination of construction and innovation, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
how do I put these pieces together to create an emotional response that other people might not see when you just have a 2x4. But when you carve it out and now it's his face, people can get emotionally attached to this piece. So how did that kind of perspective of going from construction and creativity get you to data centers and then getting you out of Microsoft to write a book about Microsoft?
Yeah, the data center is just a big building full of electronics. So, whatever the warehouse, you're building a warehouse and you're filling it with things, and there's heating and cooling. It's the real magic of data centers, I would say, is down at the chip level, like that, and then the code you put on it, and those engineers, like my partner at Microsoft, Eric Peterson. I'm not that engineer. I can't do what Eric does. But what I've learned to do in my career is find the Erics and partner them with the artist and partner them with the storyteller and partner them with the construction folks that know how to build it in the real world, and build a team that has all the skills and thoughts and questions that together we don't just build another warehouse full of IT equipment. We look at the problem in different ways. We try to solve it in different ways. And that's really where the innovation comes in. To go out and put a rack of servers in a warehouse, there's nothing really innovative about that anymore. They've been doing it for decades. So for me, the challenge of the data center world and coming to Microsoft to do it was they put me in charge of the data center of the future. That's great. Like, that's where I want to live, because that's blank sheet of paper. What do we know now that we didn't know then? And what can we do to set us up for future success? And how do we frame that problem? I would say that visioning and framing of problems and different perspectives and that collaboration as a starting point, that all comes more from my art background and my theater background than my engineering background. It's the art of what's possible and what I imagine versus how do I solve it. And the two are very complementary, I found.
Interesting. And when you talk about like the data center of the future, can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like, does that mean a zero net lot? Like, what does
Yeah.
that mean? Like, you have no emissions. You're able to retool every 3 years when the latest chip comes out. Like, what does a data center of the future mean?
So we did land in a lot of those places, but that's not where we started. We really just started with the initial question of, what does a data center need to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now? because all of the different systems that we rely on are changing. There's the environmental systems, of course, but there's also social systems and, where are we in the world? It's spreading into all new parts of, the southern hemisphere in bigger footprints than it has in the past. And that's just a different world that you have to operate in. And then the scale at which we're working is totally different. The pace that we're working is different. And then the technology that we're housing is different, right? Like, we're all seeing how different AI is than traditional compute. So, with all of those things on the horizon at 5, 10, and 15 years, and a company, because I was at Microsoft, that is committed to sustainability and had set really big, ambitious goals to be carbon neutral and water and land positive and zero waste. Yeah, you throw all that in the pot and you start cooking, and you do come out, if we're doing our jobs right, with what eventually we named the Regenerative Datacenter of the future, which meant we were looking at all of those system interactions and trying to create positive feedback loops instead of neutral or negative feedback loops.
And so from a kind of outside view, you got to play essentially innovator of the biggest world for the biggest technologies coming up on the horizon. Because it's very clear that AI is going to change how we operate, if not has already done that. And
Yeah.
I see it because I don't think I've had a single day, basically since the OpenAI ChatGPT launch, in which I have not used an AI tool personally.
Yeah.
And I know on the back end, also from, I bank with JP Morgan, that is all kind of run on data centers, right? Everything is this, there's so many AI tools that are seen, and then there's even more unseen. So
For sure.
how are you trying to kind of bring change in an environment that is changing faster than the change that you can bring?
So this is a great connection to why we wrote the book. Dean Carignan, my co-author and friend, we met because we were both leading early innovation efforts at Microsoft. He was in AI under the chief science officer, Eric Horvitz, and I was in data centers. So we were kind of at between us, we were seeing both of these things evolving and where the company and the world was going. And we were just, commiserating, trading war stories of innovation and just, getting to know each other as peers at Microsoft. And what's interesting is he has predominantly been an entrepreneur. He's spent 20 plus years at Microsoft and other big companies. And I've been predominantly an entrepreneur in small companies that I've either started or joined and helped build. But our war stories were very similar. And as we were trading these stories and looking at this future that was quickly approaching, what became apparent to us is in an AI-powered world, the future of work for humans is creativity and collaboration. And for a lot of people, that hasn't been the opportunities they've been given in their career or the opportunities they found in their career. So they're out of practice. They may never have been taught creativity and collaboration, and they may think it's something, an innate few are anointed with, and, you're either an artist or you're not. And what we really wanted to show by exploring 50 years of Microsoft history and then bringing our own perspectives to it is innovation is a craft. It's got tools and processes and skills, and you can learn them. And the more you practice it, the better you get at it. And as AI takes over the more formulaic functions of the modern world, which is a good thing in our opinion, because who wants to just show up every day and push buttons and check boxes? That's boring. It's going to free us up for what humans are innately gifted for, which is imagining a future and then going about building it. So we wanted to help provide those skills and tools and processes in a easy to digest way so that whoever is willing to do the work can pick up this book, learn the tools, put them into practice, and become a better innovator.
Awesome. And one of the things you must have seen when you go back in the history of Microsoft and these big innovations were that almost every big useful transition was out of the ordinary process to get it done. I had a mentor, Ray Blanchard, who worked at Microsoft, and he worked on deals, for example, the buying of the data centers from Chevron and Shell for Microsoft. And he mentioned that almost not a single part of that process was normal. Everything, and because of that, it was actually able to get done. Versus when you go through the normal processes, you run into a series of vetocracy. Everybody gets to veto, and
Mm.
the value of a veto is it's not on your desk, and you don't get blamed for potential downsides.
Yeah, you're getting to the heart of something that a lot of companies and people struggle with. And it's been interesting. When Dean and I started the book, we were like, we had our hypotheses about there being practices and tools, and they're really tech independent and industry independent. But we had these two little side assertions. We were like, number one, we're not going to name names. We don't want to make this about any superstar. We quickly learned that without the names and the quotes, it's not a very interesting story. So we named a lot of names. But the other assertion we started with is we don't want to talk about culture. Everybody talks about culture and it's just played out, and we don't want to talk about culture. But guess what? It's about culture. The book is very much about how, if you define culture as how do we each show up, how do we work together, what is the language we use, what are the norms that we establish, like, are we a company that runs on veto power, or are we a company that asks questions? And when we feel uncomfortable, do we see that as a sign as maybe there's something here? Or do we see it as a sign to run and hide? Like, there's all of those things that come through in the Microsoft stories of where Microsoft succeeded. They had a culture that embraced discomfort and questions and learning and perspectives that, come from different angles but come together for a common goal, versus the failures where they didn't have those things and they were bureaucratic and veto. What did you call it? Veto?
A vetocracy.
Vetocracy.
It's like a democracy dependent on the veto versus
Yes.
on the populace.
And those stories show up in Microsoft's history as well, and they led to failure.
Yeah.
So when you look at a company that is one of the most valuable companies in the world and has been consistently for 50 years, when you open that up and look under the hood, you find successes and failures, and you find patterns in both.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think that is kind of a very enlightening, because I've always said that companies are just algorithms of human capital to make revenue, right? And so how you put these bodies together and create value for customers, whether it's bringing in other assets like creating a computer or creating software or, you know, carving wood. These are just how many people do you bring together, whether full-time, part-time, partial time, or they don't even know they're part of the value chain, to solve these really complicated problems that we tend to oversimplify in many scenarios. Has there been like a scenario in which you've experienced where it was people try to make the situation a lot more complicated than it needed to be?
Yeah. Well, even just take a data center. I one of my favorite descriptions of a data center is from my former coworker Mark Monroe. He said it's a giant hair dryer. He's like, power and air go in one side and hot air comes out the other side. And it's like, you don't have to be overly precious about what a data center is when you think about it like that. And when you stop making it and I'm going to back up and just say, same thing about innovation. Like in anything in life, the more precious you make it, the more complicated you make it, the less approachable it is to reimagine it.
Absolutely. And growing up in the industry, the Pepsi and the beverage industry, right? Our brands are precious. If you try to put the Pepsi brand on anything in which you don't have jurisdiction, you have lawyers calling you. They're trying to defend something, and it's
Right.
like this control aspect, right? And I feel like in many businesses, there's this balance between control and distributed innovation, right? Where
Mm,
you empower people at the edge to make decisions, but in the mindset of what is for the greater good of the company.
yeah.
And in many cases, those systems work really, really well. But then you try to explain it to somebody who comes from a very controlling hierarchical organization, and you can see the discomfort, right? When
Yeah.
you explain to people that Jensen Huang has 60 direct reports, like just imagine saying in one division at Microsoft, okay, you are going to be the first person to try 60 direct reports. How insane would that be? But we see that it actually works, right?
I'm
And
pretty
so
sure I had 30 on my program, and there was no level of management between us. There was a core team of 6 people that were Microsoft FTEs, full times, but then the 24 augmented staff that we had, we were all equal at the table. And the only time any kind of hierarchy came into play is when we just had to make a decision, and then it was on me because at the end of the day it was my head that would have to roll. So 30 was doable. I don't know about 60, but 30 totally.
yeah,
You brought up two things that makes me think of Rita McGrath, who is, well-known thought leader,
it's great.
C-suite strategist. I've had the pleasure of getting to know her recently, and we were in Ireland together for the Reinvention Summit. And she is now talking about the permissionless organization, which I think is
Yeah,
a great way to frame it. And you can see it even in Microsoft, Mustafa's organization. He's very public about he likes to have small teams of 6 or 7 people. They like to run, I think it's 6 or 7 people, might be 15, I'm not sure. But he likes to run in 7 week sprints where 6 weeks your team is off doing what it's doing. And on the seventh week, everybody gets together, reviews, and plans for the next 6. And that's more like a startup entrepreneurial method, but at a scale that is Microsoft. And I for one have always enjoyed that much more than 10 layers of management and decisions come down from on high and they're disconnected from the front line and the customer. And I don't think that's a very productive way to be creative. If it's stamp and repeat, that's fine. But if it's creativity you're going for, I think you got to go toward what Rita is now describing as permissionless.
I am a big fan of Rita McGrath. I had a great conversation with her in Half Moon Bay. We were sitting by the fireplace and we were talking about organizational design. And one of the things that I've been preaching for years has been we should organize our companies as graph databases rather than tree databases. Because at in tree databases, which is that hierarchy, is this like filtering system versus we can do kind of a coagulating system with graph databases. So
Yeah.
imagine organizing your employees by skill sets and knowledge sets and certification levels and location and putting that stage gate on the front end versus on the back end. So you accelerate the communication. But what you also do is you're inviting every employee to participate with what they're best at and they kind of delegate the expertise to their counterparties who are in the same circle to make that decision. And we
Right.
had a great conversation kind of talking about all of the complexity and the kind of things that used to not be possible in old school methods, but now we actually have the technology to do it. And it always came down what in our conversation was to agency. Do I have the agency to do this? And do I have the trust of my organization to do this?
That's what I would, yeah, that's what I would say. Underneath that agency is high trust.
Yeah. And so do you have any like strategies to empower and give people both agency and trust? And some of that trust also means essentially here's the rope, go run, but you're responsible at the end of the day. Like do you have
Yeah.
any yeah.
Yeah, it's true. There's, with that comes accountability, right? And I've certainly seen in big organizations where nobody wants to put their name on anything. And you're the weirdo that's like, look, I will sign my name to this. And if it fails, my head will roll. I'm fine with that because I believe in what we're doing, et cetera, et cetera. That level of accountability, it makes some people really, really uncomfortable. But again, when you look at it from a creative lens, it's necessary. As far as strategies, I've been very honest about this in the talks we've done with the book. At the scale of Microsoft, I pass that question to Dean because Dean's 21 years in and is well respected and liked and has moved around the company a lot and done well. I was only there for 5 years and we did really well as a program, but I struggle in these big orgs. I really do. One of the things Dean shared though, which was a great lesson to me, is you build that rapport with people no matter what the role is today, because everybody moves around, but you build personal connections with people and with other teams long before you need them so that when the need comes up, that trust and that relationship is already there. That doesn't get rid of all of the politics and naysaying and fear and whatever, but you do get a sense for who's out there in your organization that's ready to work with you when the time comes. I've never stayed at a big company long enough to do that because that in itself can take years. And I'm more of the I'm an entrepreneur. Like 3 to 5 years, if I haven't put something out in the world that's doing something useful, I feel like I'm just treading water. So the pace of that is just not a good fit for me. But that would be Dean's recommendation. Like it's human. It's creating connections, building that trust over time, being of service to one another, and then when you need each other, putting that trust in the other.
Yeah. And so it's going to go to my next question. Would you rather be right or effective?
For me, always effective. In my team, nothing is precious. We go by the saying, say it ugly. And what that reminds us all is we don't have to be right. If we have a thought, if we have a question, we have an idea, say it ugly, get it out on the table, we'll pretty it up together. And that's how we move quickly to being effective.
That's great. I really, I have actually struggled with this for many years, and I feel like I'm finally moving into the category you chose. I would say for a long time, I always wanted to be right, and even though what I could clearly see, it was hard to bring people along the journey. And in fact,
Mm-hmm.
our mutual acquaintance, Chris Hare, has been really helpful for me to kind of learn how to communicate in a much better way to move from being right to being effective, right? And
Yeah.
I really it kind of it opens up this other piece of how much does communication matter when you're dealing with innovation at large scale.
It matters at every scale. But if we look at the Microsoft scale, you'd be surprised probably by how much time is spent choosing the right words, because when you're bringing multiple disciplines together and different, if you're bringing researchers together with engineers, together with salespeople, the same word can mean different things to different people. And the last thing you want to do is communicate in such a way that people walk out with different ideas in their head. So, what we recommend and what we found works is multimodal communication. Don't just use words. Use words, use pictures, create feelings, use data. So there's all these different ways of communicating the same values, ideas, vision, but it's going to resonate no matter what way somebody is looking to hear it or waiting to hear it. They find what they need to understand it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big keys that we're going to see with AI is it helps explain and communicate across a variety of strategies that before, as somebody like myself, I'm not an animator. I'm not a video producer. I had an animation company back in the early aughts. And it's like it's one of these things where you realize that you can spurn up different ways to present information very simply.
Yeah.
Even the image that I use for this podcast, right? It's a picture of me sitting down with my pink shoes that I tend to wear at conferences so people can spot me. But it also has hydrogen, a cup of beverage, and CO2 because I needed to communicate in very few images what I'm about and essentially what the podcast is about. And it's only possible with these tools. And you have helped build the innovation and the infrastructure for these tools. So what's next?
What's next in the world or for me?
I believe they go hand in hand, but let's start with what's it with you?
So, with the book launch now, I would say we're done the book launch, the official launch, and now we're in, book as a medium for conversation. It's given me back the bandwidth to really launch my new venture, which is Regenerous Labs. And that's a collaboration that's been forming over the last year plus with some of my longest term partners. Like my head of engineering and I go back 25 years. My head of strategy and brand communication, we got 10 years together. So these are the people that no matter what I'm trying to solve, I always call them in. And this time I approached them and I said, instead of starting with a what and then building a team and figuring it out, I'm going to start with the who. I want to build the team. And then together we're going to identify what we want to work on and how we want to do it. And for us, we're all super senior in our careers, in our crafts. It's this space we've created to master our crafts and bring our fullest abilities to bear on the things we're working on, which a lot of times, whether we're internal somewhere or we're hired by a customer, just the dynamics of consulting or employer tend to limit what we're able to do. We wanted to create a place where we could do the full expanse of what we're capable of without those limits, which is why if you go to our website, it says we've removed the constraints where no customers, no client, no bosses, no boards, just partners. And so there's 7 partners in the collaboration, and we're partnering with others to solve problems that are important to us.
Interesting. So can you give me an example of a problem that you guys plan to solve?
So we do have some focus areas. We're looking at the intersection of the natural environment and all that it does with well-being and all of the dimensions of what it means to be a thriving individual, and then education. And so, in one partnership, we're looking at that environmental pillar and saying, how do we how do we really understand the environment from the ground up, where people and systems and the environment intersect, and what interventions, what enablements can we develop to help create regenerative feedback loops there? And so it's this ability, the space we've created is letting us really paint big, bold future pictures and then work back from them, instead of being kind of anchored to wherever we're at today and trying to move forward. And that just opens up all kinds of possibilities. And we're doing the same thing in that well-being pillar and education pillars. I don't like using the word pillars. They're more like roots. They're all roots of the same tree. And we're trying to grow them in such a way that they come together. Our mission statement as it stands today is, how do we or we're working to unleash the potential of 8 billion individuals to thrive together.
That's beautiful. I love the big image and working back from there. I grew up kind of one of the small bottlers in the Pepsi system, and I realized that we probably had an outside voice versus the amount of cases we sold. But it gave me a perspective of understanding, okay, for us to move as a group, I needed to not just pull my father along, I needed to pull this spread out organization of people who just happen to be delivering a product called Pepsi on a truck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's happened is, over the years, I started to become much more clear of what that system needs at scale to really transform. And that's why right now I'm focused on kind of how do I build the infrastructure for fuel and fizz for the beverage industry on a global level using the waste streams of our value chain and supply chain.
Right.
Quite quite simply, we are producing large piles of waste everywhere, and then we don't know what to do with it because we're not, the end of one supply chain is not talking to the beginning of another.
Right.
And it's one of these things where once you get bigger vision, you actually get much more clear, and you also realize that there are certain details that matter and many that don't.
Yes. It's interesting. I talk about aim for positive, and the idea that, for decades businesses have been talking efficiency and optimization, which is really aim for less of something and aim for neutral of something. But when you aim for positive, all of a sudden a lot of things that would have just been the go-to solution, they go away because they don't create abundance and they don't connect the end of one thing to the start of something else. But the moment you paint that positive vision of the future, positive feedback loops and abundance, creating a surplus around you, as Satya Nadella would say, you have to solve differently to achieve that picture. And it just drives innovation inherently.
I would add another thing that people often forget with innovation: it requires bandwidth. And if you're building a really efficient work, that means you're doing the same thing you did yesterday, today. You're not giving yourself time to learn something new. And I can't tell you how many times it frustrates me that we don't give employees time to upskill, learn new things because what we're measuring. And
Yes.
I feel like we are hitting this like quantum, the rules of quantum mechanics are hitting us right in the face, where observing it is distorting it, right?
It's true. Yeah.
Like, how many businesses have measured a KPI and then got that KPI in a better position, but the company lost revenue, lost margin, and lost people,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
all of a sudden the KPI was this like driving force that made everybody work around it or for it rather than use it as a measurement tool of how far we have progressed.
And see, those are the things that come out in the book of These are the repeated things that the successful innovators do. They look at their measurements and they change them. They they're like, this measurement doesn't serve us anymore. We're going to let it go and we're going to create this new one. And then we're going to see if it's driving the behavior that we want. And if it doesn't, we're going to change it again. If it does, we're going to run with it for a bit, but we're going to check. And in a little while, we're going to make sure it's still serving us. So they build those habits and those practices, and there are 100 of them. You know, it's not like do this one thing and you're now an innovative organization. It's a
Pizza
hundred little
party.
habits, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, 100 tiny habits if you want to reference BJ Fogg of the Stanford Behavior Design Lab, right?
right.
Incredible book. But yeah, no, I think this has been great. You've mentioned a book multiple times. What is the name of the book?
So the book is The Insider's Guide to Innovation at Microsoft. The website is innovationatmicrosoft.com. All proceeds are going to STEAM education charities. That's an important note because we're not only just the readers of the book, we want them to benefit and acquire skills. We also want to reinvest that back into the future innovators and creators.
Awesome. And what does STEAM stand for?
So, STEAM is the typical STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, but we sell it with the A in there for the arts because, as we've talked about throughout this conversation, without art and music and philosophy and all of those things, you know, the creative world is finally becoming, I think, I was just chatting with somebody online. We think it's finally going to be held on par with the business and the tech world because the tech world is getting commoditized and it's changing so rapidly. You're going to need these creative skills, and that's going to come out of the art world.
That I agree with that. That is amazing. And so we're here at the end of the interview. I have two more questions. One is, what are you waiting for to happen before this takes off? Is it adoption? What is it? And then the next question is very important. What are you looking forward to?
I don't think I'm waiting for anything. I was thinking about that question before we got on the line. And yeah, no, every day there's new possibilities unfolding. And I'm enjoying each and every day of it and just trying to learn and experiment and identify where I can add value. So I'm not really waiting for anything. And what am I looking forward to? Yeah, I am looking forward to the fifth industrial revolution. So everybody right now is, you know, talking about the fourth, which is great. But if you're in innovation, you shouldn't be talking about now. You need to talk about the future. And for me, there's a few people, myself included, talking about the fifth. And the fifth is being described is when technology is bent back into the service of life. I describe it as moving out of this transforming in information age to transforming the human experience. And I think that future is that thriving future where we can legitimately support thriving across the world.
I love that. I have always thought that the fifth industrial revolution is going to be a mixture of governments finally understanding their role is to solve the inefficiencies between microeconomics and macroeconomics and creating an environment for growth. And I think we're at a point where we're starting to realize for these systems to work and keep everybody involved, we need to be much more innovative of how we group people to solve big, large, complicated problems that are no longer so surface area, like, are you hungry? Here's some bread.
Yeah. Well, you could go the other way, though. You could go the hyper local way. How do I improve the 5 miles around me?
Yeah. Well, I don't think they're different, actually. I think they're the same.
Yeah.
because I'm looking to take local waste, convert into local value, and then be able to take that local waste stream and help that local distribution network. Basically, a way to systematically reduce the amount of vehicles on the road and also address backup power for data centers, get them water, and all of the infrastructure pieces that are needed because we have those resources locally. We just don't think of them as resources, we think of them as waste streams.
Mm,
But this has been
very
great.
cool.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great. I really appreciate having you on. We've had JoAnn Garbin on. This is Andy Weinstein, host of What Are You Waiting For? Thank you for listening in to our latest episode.